Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you very much, Sister Iman, for these kind introductions and for your leadership in putting together these very important events for the community. Thank you, Brother Salah, for your leadership and for your hospitality. Thank you for all who made time this evening. It is an honor for me to be here with you and an honor really to be sitting on this panel with these esteemed individuals. I've been in the business 20 years, so I'm older than they are, but they're not, when we talk about Rifqa, Jinan, and Walid, they're not just, the source of my pride is not that they're just leaders of tomorrow, but they're already stepped up to be leaders of today. And nothing could warm my heart more than to know we have people like that who've stepped up into the leadership the way they have. Before we get into the details of the questions at hand, what to do when confronted with an ICE agent, immigration questions, things like that, I wanted to make sure that we can zoom out a little bit and understand the context of which these things are happening, to see the forest from the trees. Because the last thing I want for our community is to become simply a reactionary community to what's happening, seeking safety and survival, without understanding that we have a claim to make in terms of justice. So yes, we'll defend ourselves, but we're also going on the offensive, and nothing will stop us from doing that because we have a claim for justice. So two things are changing right now, or have changed, that are causing all of the things that we'll be talking about. One is the presence of a new administration that is headed by an individual who at best is highly unpredictable, but also whose track record in the White House previously in the first term showed that we have a lot to be concerned about, with the Muslim ban, if you recall, in 2017 and things like that. But also the policy initiatives coming out of his administration have been very volatile and have been very threatening to minority communities, particularly those who are immigrants or from immigrant communities. Secondly, and this is the point I want to ruminate on a little longer, is the genocide that's happening in Gaza. And that is important because if you think about it, for a genocide to take place for a year and a half plus, in full view of the world, in a time in which there are phones and internet connections and TikToks and social media, for this to happen so blatantly and so openly, there has to be a lot of work in terms of gaslighting, in terms of manipulation, in terms of repression, in order to allow such a thing to happen. And so basically, the genocide in of itself, all of the horrors and the terrors we see and we know about, I won't get too much into that. It's continuing to happen as we speak. It's getting worse in a way with the famines, the starvations, which are man-made, the destruction of homes and hospitals and infrastructure. All of that continues to happen as we speak, which in of itself is unbelievable. That despite all the protests and all of the efforts and all of the diplomatic outreach that has happened, that they're still able to do what they're doing with relative impunity, mostly because of the support of this country's current and previous administrations. Setting that aside for a second, domestically here, like I said, in order for this to be able to happen, they have to work really hard to stop voices of protest and dissent, which brings us closer to what we're going to be talking about. And so there are policies being put in place in order to target those who are, let's say, vocal about the criticism of what is happening and exposing what is happening. And so we see now a situation in which the American government is being weaponized against its citizens. We're seeing a situation in which universities are being weaponized against their students. A situation in which the immigration system is weaponized against immigrants. Employers are weaponized against their employees. Schools are weaponized against their students. And that is a threat to America. It's not just a threat to the Muslim community or the pro-Palestinian community or the anti-genocide community, but really it's a threat to the very fabric and the very essence of what makes America America. And there is a very, very concentrated and almost conspiratorial, frankly, threat to American freedoms of expression, our First Amendment rights, in ways that we've never seen before. I mean, just yesterday, an American well-known artist, singer, Bruce Springsteen, born in the USA, ironically is one of his famous songs. He, in one of his, what do you call those things? Concerts or whatever, like performances, he criticized the president. And he criticized him in objective terms. I mean, he wasn't swearing, he wasn't cursing. And so the president, in the middle of this Middle East tour that he's doing, where he's collecting trillions, not billions of dollars, and he's busy meeting with all these people and headlines are being written, somehow takes time out of this very busy schedule to tweet back, criticizing his physical appearance, attacking him and saying, "Shut up. Do not criticize me. We'll see what happens to you when you come back to the United States." Can you imagine this language of a US president? Now, of course, he's entitled to say what he needs to say because we have freedom of speech, or so you think. That is just one little anecdote, but here in our own communities, we're seeing students who've done nothing wrong, no criminal record, being picked up from the streets and being almost deported, being put into the deportation sort of assembly line, simply because they stood up against genocide. It always comes back to that. We find that a lot of organizations, Zionist organizations that have been set up anew or that have been around for a while, are targeting any expression of anti-genocide sentiment. And so now people talk about Jewish, Muslim. These are not the delineations that we're talking about or ought to be talking about. They even talk about Zionists, which I do a lot, but you know what? It goes further. It's pro-genocide versus anti-genocide. That's the line. And so the pro-genocide lobby, that's the only term I have for them at this point. They're organizing very strongly into civic spaces, political spaces, media spaces, legal spaces, in order to shut down as hard and as fast as they can all of the anti-genocide expressions. And so organizations like the Chicago Jewish Alliance, which the name sounds legitimate, but really is 5 people who created this AstroTurf, non-grassroots organization recently as a result of the Chicago City Council voting for a resolution against or for a ceasefire. And so they found that to be bigoted and anti-Semitic. Just calling to stop the murder of innocent children for them was a threat to their existence and their culture and their legacy. Very interesting. Putting that aside, they then formulated this little group. And since then, they've been attacking schools and universities and libraries and public institutions, anywhere where there's Palestinian identity or culture, any expression of that. So we have a teacher, for example, in one of the schools who decided to teach the Gaza genocide. In the genocide track of her course, along with the Holocaust and other things, they accused her of anti-Semitism and tried to get her fired. We have other students in another well-known school up north, Stevenson, actually the top-rated school in Illinois, who in World Culture Day had a presentation and they put a watermelon pattern in part of their display, which is completely legitimate as a cultural expression of resilience against occupation, murder, genocide, etc. And they said that that was political and anti-Semitic, and they had the school take it down and we had to step in and deal with that situation. They've had movies, films, documentaries that have been shown in public universities, public libraries shut down through threat and intimidation, calling these films anti-Semitic, despite the fact that they're oftentimes filmed and produced not only by Jews, but by Israelis who are anti-genocide. And in all of these situations, there's one common theme: relative success for them. Why? Because the common theme is that these entities become intimidated out of fear of being accused of being anti-Semitic. And so they kowtow and they bend over backwards and they accommodate this bully group. And so we come in with a whole profile of who this group is and the fact that it's a hate group. And this gentleman back there who's nodding his head, Jordan, has put together a bunch of videos with his own face and voice, calling out the details of what this group is, how it gets its funding, what it does. It's a hate group looking to shut down Palestinian presence and existence. It's a hate group. But that's the work that we have to do. Now, to close off this introduction, I want to say the following, that I don't think for a moment that this administration even intends, forget that whether they can or not, they can't, but they don't even intend to, nor do they even want to truly deport all of the unwanted or undesirable voices. I mean, there's no resources are possible for them to do that. What they're looking to do is to instigate enough fear by picking certain anecdotal, cases that create such a ripple effect that for the rest of the population, they self-censor. Deport a few students, shut down a few protests, criminalize a few voices, right? Whether it's students or whether it's migrants, and then cause the rest of the population to go, oh, maybe I'm next, let me shut it down, and become self-censorship. That's the real name of the game. It's to instigate fear. It's fear-mongering. And so, to me, as a community, the last thing that we should do is to fall into the trap and start to self-censor out of fear, therefore losing not only the battle but the war, and allowing the voices of pro-genocide support to be the only voices. Now, how do we do that without getting ourselves in legal trouble? We'll be talking about that, but I'll just say to that point, even without their threat, if we are principled and objective, if we're data-driven and not emotional venting, if we are per our own religion, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, you have two friends, two allies. One is truth, and truth is not just fact. It's also data, it's also research, right? It's not just what you feel or what you want to say. It's careful, measured language. And sabr is not just patience, it's persistence. In Islam, sabr is not a passive thing, it's an active thing. It's not just waiting, it's being persistent even when there is trial and tribulation. We have those two things, then we continue to speak the truth without self-censoring, without fear. With that, I'll turn it to Rifqa, who will begin the process of talking details about the ICE situation, the immigration situation, and then we'll go down the panel. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum.